party officials, and distinguished members of the public. A very good evening to you all. Let me begin with a confession. Is that better? Yeah. Let me begin with a confession. After many attempts, I really have come to the conclusion that I've been a total failure at the 10-minute presentation. Now, I was asked to do a 10-minute presentation this evening, and so what I decided to do was to pen my thoughts and to read them to you. That way, I believe I may be able to stick within the guidelines. So I won't waste any time telling jokes about lawyers and politicians and so forth, only to find that my 10 minutes has expired. Okay, so I'm going to speak on order and Jamaican society, national purpose and critical development choices for the next 25 years. For a country to truly develop, its people and most of all its leadership must be future-oriented. I believe that as a people, we are able to shape our future, to imagine it, make choices, and work to make these choices a reality. We are therefore responsible and accountable to future generations. It is my sense that these are defining times. What we do now will be consequential. Let me therefore thank Mr. Bunting and the organizers of this function for having this conversation about the long-term development of our country. There are two roads to the next 25 years. The first is via adaptation, that is simply drifting along and trying to manage each problem as it arises. On this road, every day is simply a struggle for survival. On this road, we never have a future because we never plan for it. Time simply passes and the society remains stagnant. The second road is by deliberately constructing the future. One of the things that elevate us as humans is that we are architects. Unlike the lesser animals, we are not just doers, we imagine. We design before we construct, and we share the products of our imagination with others. In so doing, we develop a collective vision, and with this, we generate the power of collective action, which allows us to shape our future as a people. Yes, getting to a desirable future involves having a vision, but more than this is required. As Norman Manley stated in 1968 on his 75th birthday, the future must be understood in terms of, quote, its dangers, its opportunities, and its requirements, end of quote. Scenario building is one way of systematizing this approach, but I shall not be that rigorous. I understand my limitations and the limitations of time. So for the rest of the presentation, I wish to do the following two things. First, to try to stimulate a discussion regarding one simple, transformative, long-term goal. And in so doing, discuss some of the values that ought to inform our construction of the future and define ourselves as a people. The goal is thus, in a more general sense, one of self-definition as a nation. Second, I'll try to illustrate this idea with one project, that is the cleaning up of our cities and achieving a more orderly society. I set myself quite a task, so allow me to scale it back a bit. I will only introduce the issues, not spend too much time explaining or justifying anything. At the dawn of independence, countries like ours faced four major challenges: the formation of national identity, economic development, social transformation, and creating appropriate institutions that would serve the people and the national cause. N.W. Manley was very future-oriented, and with the plan and all of that I'm sure many of you here remember. He deeply contemplated national mission and purpose. At the end of his political career, he noted that, quote, "My generation had a distinct mission. It was to create a national spirit with which we could identify ourselves as a people for the purpose of achieving independence on the political plane." He put the issue of, quote, national spirit squarely on the agenda. By national spirit, I take him to mean those values that lay at our constitutive core, those values and virtues that animate us as a people. I take it to mean identity. National spirit and identity were, however, not just central to the independence mission. They were also central to the development tasks that faced the nation. They were central to building the unity and cohesion that were and are necessary in order to overcome difficulties and to achieve national goals. If we have a common identity, then we may accept the idea of a common goal. And if we are prepared to work for that common goal, then we have national spirit. Let me say that while we have made progress in forming a national identity, the national spirit is still too little developed. Take the case of serious crimes. Crime is a common threat and regarded by most as a major problem. And yet we still have so much difficulty making common cause on this issue. Times of social and political consensus are rare and fleeting. There is clearly much work to be done in forging national purpose and national spirit. And this work must be done if we are to move ahead beyond adaptation. Against this background, I wish to suggest that an important aspect of this national mission is to more consciously shape a national identity and spirit. By this I mean deliberately identifying and claiming as national traits those values and virtues that we hold dear, and mobilizing these to achieve our national development goals. We, however, cannot just dream up these traits as ideals. They must have some grounding in our experience, in our realities. For example, when Australian cricketers talk of never giving up on the outcome of a match until the last ball is bowled, they are doing so to pull on their grit as a national trait. The development of this virtue is grounded in the conditions of life at an earlier time in Australia. They choose to speak of it as a national trait and make it mobilizable in a rather intense way when it comes. We speak of our resilience as a feature of national character. But what does it mean to be resilient? And how can this virtue be mobilized? It seems to me that it is a bit ambiguous and may be mobilized for good and for bad. It may be mobilized to get us through difficult times and to maintain optimism about the future. But it may be also mobilized to subvert order. When the street vendor puts on a guerrilla-type resistance to the police, is this a display of resilience? Many would say it is. If so, then this virtue stands in opposition to what I would argue is a cardinal value of development, order. We must be careful of ambiguities in hoisting national values and virtues. Let me probe this issue a bit more in a rather narrow way. I've already suggested that values and virtues as national traits, that is, as accepted elements of national identity, are central to the type of society that we wish to construct. You get a clean city by valuing and practicing cleanliness. Values ought not to be confused with virtues. I think of values as, if you wish, valuables. We hold them dearly and organize our lives to achieve them. This is why we make them organizing principles for national life and the type of future that we may wish to construct. Jamaicans value education. We value it as a means of social elevation. Education, as Norman Manley once noted, quote, opens all doors. It is thus a kind of universal value, a means of accessing other valuables. Through it, we invest in a better future for ourselves and for our country. We also value justice as fairness. The calls for justice are, in my opinion, calls for fairness. Tied to this value is equality of opportunity and equality before the law. The latter, that is equality before the law, is however not possible unless the rule of law is very strong. This takes me to the values that I wish to highlight as basic conditions for a better society. These values are order, and related to this, law abidance and cleanliness. Law abidance and order are fundamental conditions for development and prosperity. And in our tourism-dependent economy, cleanliness is linked to our economic future. These values or valuables are closely linked to confidence in the society's future. Confidence in Jamaica as, quote, the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business, end of quote. I may now proceed to my second objective, how to achieve a more orderly society and cleaner cities in the next 25 years. Yoman, could you kindly put up the first slide for me, please? As you know, it is not unusual for countries and people to be judged by how clean their cities are. I'm sure that when we visit foreign places, some of us make such judgments about the values and virtues or lack thereof of the people who live in those places. Thus, people X are unhygienic and disorderly, people Y are clean and orderly. This is why I link values with identity. I've chosen to focus on our cities and towns because they are the main population centers, the centers of power. Moreover, the ways of the city easily become the ways of the country. So if you look at this first slide now, you see I have a kind of ranking of our cities and towns, and I put all of them in red at the moment as pretty untidy cities and disorderly cities, with the exception of Mandeville and Ocho, which I put in yellow. And the idea is that as you move from red to green over the 25-year period, they become cleaner and more orderly. So we want eventually in 15 or more years to have all of them in the green. Okay, so that's the basic idea here. Now turn to slide 2. How do we achieve that? Now, how do we achieve that? I'll consider redoing this slide that I Yeah, how do we achieve that now? There are some specific steps that I want to highlight. The first step is what I call boundary setting. In other words, you can't do it all at once. So let me give you an example of boundary setting. Vending is a huge problem. It creates a lot of disorder in our cities and towns. So the idea is that you set some boundaries and you change the boundaries over time as you progress. So, as examples then of rules for vending, which is what boundary setting is about, your city could have no vending zones, zones in which ambulatory vending is permitted. That is, you can move around, but you can't stay in one place and vend. And then you may have free-for-all vending zones, in which you may sit, stand, move around, do do whatever you please, right? But a rule is established about how you may vend, your mode of vending, depending on the zone that you are in. Take another problem of street people on the streets. They litter, they help to create disorder and so forth. We may establish a rule. In a certain zone, you may stand, but you may not lay down in that zone. So just earlier this week, I was driving through New Kingstown, down Knutsford Boulevard, and there was a man lying in the median with his cardboard and so forth. This is Knutsford Boulevard, New Kingston, right? So you could have a rule. Yes, there are places in the city where you may spread your cardboard and lie down, but not Knutsford Boulevard or not whatever the street is in Mandeville and so forth. You establish boundaries, you establish rules, okay? Let me note this is not zero tolerance, and I'm going to come back to that. It's not how zero tolerance works, right? Now, having fixed the rules and got people to understand them, that is, you have set your boundaries, the next is to patrol the boundaries. So you fix the boundaries based on your patrolling capabilities. That way, people will take rules seriously because they are enforceable, right? Which is a problem with zero tolerance. It's not enforceable, it's just rubbish and it is ignored. It's just hot air balance. So that's the first step. The second step is based on the principle of jiu-jitsu, is what I think that's a form of martial arts, right? In which you turn the force of the person against them and use it to overpower them, right? So how do we apply this to the problem of order and cleanliness in our cities? For example, those who litter will be fined, right? You fine them, you have a global system of patrolling. You fine them, the fines go into a pool. Now, that pool could be used, for example, to clean up your street people and so forth. Your street people could perhaps even be used as part of your clean up street people, of course, now. Begin to model order and you incorporate them in your system of keeping your city clean. Fines can be used to pay additional people to help to enforce the rules and so forth, right? Also, if you're coming in force orders and the people who litter are in turn now obliged under pain of fines if they choose not to pay the fines. Then they do 3 hours cleaning up a particular street in the city and so forth, right? So the litter boats now are used to help to bring about greater order and cleanliness. Third element of this could be to use some kind of incentives for the people who are formally employed to help to enforce the rules. So at an earlier time we had traffic wardens or some such thing. You have some kind of monitor, and your fines could be used, for example, in some kind of revolving fund that would allow them to get personal loans and so forth. The idea is that the people who are enforcing the system would have some incentive to actually work, right? And to make the thing a success. I'm getting signals from the chair, so let me make the main point about this idea. If you look there, you will see the 2 lines. When we are in the red, we have to rely very heavily on formal enforcement, police type of operations to enforce the boundaries, enforce the rules. Now, as you progress into yellow and into green, you are relying less on that kind of formal policing type of measures to maintain order and cleanliness. And you are relying more on the mobilization of your citizens, right? And as well as eventually the self-regulation of people. Right? People just refraining from behaving in a disorderly manner and littering in the city. So in 25 years' time now, we see the life is changing. We are moving from high level of formal control into self-regulation. And hopefully you get to that point, then even without sweeping the streets in the morning, when you look in the day, later into the evening, the streets are still clean, and there are societies in the Caribbean who are our competitors in tourism that if you go to their cities any hour of day and night, it is clean because the citizens keep it clean. It's a self-regulating society. Right? So that really is the process. There are many challenges and risks. There are challenges of overbearing control, initially leading to pushback, and you suffer setbacks and so forth. There are political challenges, risks of any political party that attempts this one, the risk of the opposition saying you are against poor people and so forth. There are all of those problems that have to be navigated. I wanted to highlight some of the conditions for success, but let me just point to one. A strong will to get this done. Right? I think that is the important condition for success. That translates into leadership at the national level, leadership at the city level, and perhaps even leadership at the street level. So I think I've made a simple and achievable suggestion. The importance of it is in its symbolism, in the power of self-definition as a people. I believe we have the power. The challenge is to use that power for a better future. Thank you.